Welcome to the Star Wars Canon Cantina, a show where we try to answer the question, who is Luke Skywalker, before the release of Star Wars Episode 9. My name is Jesse Aiken, and I am on the space station Tulsa, planet Oklahoma again. I think we got it right that time. And I'm with my great co-host and Star Wars best friend here, Mike Carpenter. How you doing, Mike?
I'm good. I'm over here at Salt Lake Base on planet Utah. It's finally starting to cool off here. I welcome fall. How's it down there?
It's about the same. It's not great, but I've decided this week alone. You know, we're in February now. It's February. I can't even speak.
Where are we?
September now. September now, and fall's got to get here at some point. So, which is my favorite season. So I'm ready.
No idea where February came from.
I have no idea either. I've worked 7 days in a row, and I've played 2 shows the last couple of days.
All right,
so I've just worked too much. Hey, there it is. My band has a song called February.
Oh yeah,
maybe that's what it is.
Right,
Brain's not working. Brain's not working.
Well, we've got low brain power, Lobot Jesse today, so this could be fun.
Right.
Today we are covering a novel called Heir to the Jedi. It is a canon novel and was one of the earliest ones released after the Disney acquisition of Lucasfilm. We've been talking and working on this episode for weeks now, right?
Yeah. Now, what does that say?
Well, it says a few things. Like a couple episodes ago, we had our Resistance diversion that we did when I was back in Oklahoma visiting.
That's right, because you were traveling and we couldn't do this normal recording, editing, all that fun business.
Yeah, that's right.
Unreasonable.
But I brought the book with me to read on the plane and stuff. And the day after I got back home, my dad texted me, "Hey, do you want me to mail this to you?" And I was like, "Oh, well, by the time it gets here, we'll be recording this, and I don't want to spend the money to buy this again. So,
Please
I'm
don't.
good." Heir to the Empire is a rough book.
Heir to the Empire. There it is.
No.
There's the first one of many.
First, yeah, see, we're even going to talk about that. Heir to the Empire is great. Heir to the Jedi is rough. Just some background information on the book. It was originally published in March of 2015, ahead of the release of The Force Awakens.
Right.
It's by an author named Kevin Hearn, who I'd not heard of before, and just according to the inside of the book, he has also written a series called The Iron Druid Chronicles. And something interesting I learned about this book in researching it was that it was originally planned for the Legends continuity, the pre-Disney acquisition timeline.
Okay.
As the last of the Empire and Rebellion trilogy. And it was going to be the third book, coming after Razor's Edge, a Leia novel by Martha Wells, and Honor Among Thieves, a Han novel by Daniel Abraham.
Okay. So that gives us a little context. So it seems like this was at that tail end of the EU, Mike, we talked about, which was a little bit of a lull. And they just last second, switched? And they're like, no, this could be canonical. This could work with the new canon.
Yeah, it must
flush it out more.
It must be they decided, well, we need something about Luke. So we'll just go ahead and drag this forward into our new canon, even though it wasn't originally intended to be there. Which maybe that, should earn the book a little bit of a break, because it feels so out of place among the new canon stuff because it wasn't originally intended to be there, perhaps.
Right. But I've also got to mention too, Mike, it does feel out of place with the Legends EU as well. So it honestly it's completely out of place with both of these timelines. Maybe not timeline wise, but just what happens in the story and the style and the writing. Everything is so different from both what we've seen of the new canon and the old Legends. Almost no consistencies other than we have a character named Luke Skywalker, which, we have to cover in our show, Mike, because this is a Luke Skywalker story through and through.
That's right. So this book was just sort of caught in limbo in between that Disney acquisition. So unfortunate situation for it. Do you think it was called Heir to the Jedi to confuse people with Heir to the Empire? Clearly it does, because I've already made that mistake in this episode.
I have no idea. Maybe it's just that Heir to the Empire sounds really cool. Like it sounds really good. It sounds like a really strong Star Wars title, and Heir to the Jedi sounds like a really good, strong Star Wars title.
It totally does.
I gotta mention too, Mike. The best thing about this book is probably the name and the cover. The cover's pretty solid too.
I thought you were going to say it's relatively short.
No, it's not short, or at least it didn't feel short at all. I don't even know.
It's short in terms of number of pages.
Yeah, it made the Hunger Games writing feel like Shakespeare, but I just...
Ooh, shots fired. Hold on.
We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
We highlight all of my flaming hot takes about like Game of Thrones being bad. So we have a Hunger Games hater on the podcast. Is that what I'm getting?
No, not necessarily. I read it because, pop culture, and, at the time the book was on fire. No pun intended. This is way before the film acquisition. And I read it, and those books have some really bad writing moments and some really good writing moments. It's just a lot of up and downs. This book, the whole time.
Okay. All right.
And the only reason I draw a parallel is because we'll get more into it in a moment, but this feels very YA, but it's not YA, which is a problem. And on top of that, it's all first-person writing, which is exactly what the Hunger Games is. So that's where I drew the parallels. It reminded me of that, but I'm like, this is way worse writing.
For the people who might not know, when he talks about a YA book, that's just a young adult level book. So feels a little bit more teenagery.
This was not intended to be YA, but the writing is very clearly YA, and the way the characters interact and stuff is very YA. And so much so that it actually makes me kind of offended and bummed out for people who like YA, because it's kind of a devolved version of YA as well. Like Lost Stars was not like this.
No, Lost Stars is
it was much more mature.
Yeah.
It was much more mature. So, and same with Hunger Games, despite its flaws as well. But the cover is great. I'm gonna stand by that. We got Luke in the black and the brown pants. No yellow jacket. He took it off. It's the rest of the outfit.
It's very 80s. It feels like they took a pose of like 80s TV Tom Selleck or something and decided to model Luke after that or something.
Yeah, and I actually looked at the full cover art, and I'm assuming this is if you take the sleeve off. I'm not sure, but it keeps going, and you see a TIE fighter going through a canyon, and then you see R2 with I'm assuming his little shock arm out. But it's Luke and R2 are together throughout the whole book for the most part. So that's consistent too. But yeah, cover's real good. That's about it. So I don't know, Mike, there's too much to say. Anything else we want to say about the creation of the book before we get into the actual content of the book?
No, let's get ready to dive into that content. So
did you say the author?
I did. I said Kevin Hearn.
Yeah. Did you said the Iron Druid?
Yeah.
I just completely brain's not working.
Yeah. I think you're just proving you don't listen when I'm talking. That's okay.
No, that's not true at all. I wanted to mention that the Iron Druid Chronicles is a whole nother level of weird as well.
Oh, have you read it?
No, but I know a couple people who have, and I've asked for the summary of it in preparation of this episode, and just because I've heard his name thrown around. Really strange concept for a book, but something we get in the future. But it's essentially a modern day man who's an ancient druid who runs a bookstore in modern day.
That sounds pretty bad.
And that's the hook.
If that's your thing, good for you. It doesn't seem like it's the best fit for Star Wars, clearly.
Yeah.
So we have 3 questions that we try to frame our discussion around for every canon source that we look at. First question is, what state is Luke in at the beginning of the story? Which is important if we're like picking up immediately after another book ended, or if there's some time that has passed between, all that sort of stuff. How do the events and characters of the story impact his development throughout the entire overall Star Wars story? And the third question, does this version of Luke that we get fit with the Luke that we met in Episode 8, The Last Jedi?
Well, let's get into it.
Ever since Luke disappeared, people have been looking for him.
I'm Luke Skywalker. I'm here to rescue you.
A lot of rumors, stories.
And I became a legend.
People that knew him best.
Luke. Young Skywalker.
Luke.
It's all true.
I am a Jedi. Like my father before me.
All of it.
Our story opens with Luke doing something somewhere. That's right. I don't even have my book to go back and reference anymore. Jesse, how do we find Luke at the start of this story?
It's been quite a few weeks since I read the beginning, Mike, but essentially the beginning, we get a whole summary of A New Hope, which I think is horrendous. I don't know why we go into this, but essentially Luke goes through all the thoughts of the things he experienced with Obi-Wan and meeting Leia and the Death Star trench and then getting the medal ceremony and all that, just in case the audience forgot. But none of that's important. We all know that. So let's move on to what happens next.
What is important, though, and this is expanding on a point you made earlier, the book is written entirely in first person.
Yes.
So everything you're reading is Luke thinking, I remember when I was flying through the Death Star trench, and I remember when did I hear Obi-Wan talk to me? Which,
yeah, he does say that.
When first person is done well, I don't necessarily have a problem with it. It's a really big departure for style for both
Star Wars,
the old Legends canon and the current Disney canon. If it's done well, I don't have a problem with it, but it's usually used more effectively in shorter stories than, like an entire Star Wars novel.
Definitely. Yeah, let's not go on a literature lesson here, Mike, but most Star Wars is third person omniscient or third person removed. And even sometimes we get vignettes of first person, but it's not
exactly. Yeah.
But it's not first person writing. It's we're in the moment with the character and they feel something and the story tells us that. It's not saying, I saw this thing over there. What is that thing? That's this whole thing is with Luke.
So right off the bat, it's a little jarring.
It's
different.
It's jarring. Yeah, and that's where the parallels I draw with Hunger Games, which has much better writing, even though it's completely first person as well. So yeah, we have.
Oh, I guess I should admit I never actually read Hunger Games.
Yeah, that's for the biggest parallel I was drawing, especially with the YA as well. Which is also why the Hunger Games movies are so different. But so we have first person narration of Luke in his brain, essentially, of all the events in New Hope. And then pretty quickly we're introduced to Luke being told about a mission. And the mission, I think a big misstep of this author once again, and this is going to happen a few times, but Luke's given a mission by Mon Mothma and Admiral Ackbar. And we're treated like these are characters we should know. And we're not even given any description what they look like, who they are, anything. It's kind of like, Star Wars, right? Mon Mothma and Admiral Ackbar. And it's like, technically, this is their first introduction in the canon.
That's true. So that's probably a holdover from when it was written in the old Legends continuity.
So it's not good because, someone first reading this should say, who are these characters? Especially if they've seen Empire or Jedi, which clearly probably most of the world has if they're reading this book. But, if this is consistent with the timeline of this book, this is supposed to be filling the gaps between Empire and New Hope and Empire, similar to the Marvel comics. And we should at least get an introduction to who Ackbar and Mon Mothma are. So, but that's just a thing. Unfortunate consequence of this book. But Luke gives us this mission for the rebels.
So Mon Mothma and Ackbar, are they on Home 1 at this point, or they're out in space? They're with the Rebel fleet. It might not be Home 1, the flagship we see in Jedi. But,
no, it doesn't say Home 1.
But regardless, the Rebel fleet is treated sort of like the central hub in a video game, and Ackbar and Mon Mothma and sort of Leia, they really are just in the story to act as quest givers for Luke, basically.
You're so right, Mike. And this is actually pointing to a really good point of this story. This feels like several stories smashed together rather than one story with an arc.
It's like 4 or 5 Luke missions that get mashed together to fit an overall narrative. So honestly, talking about it like that, if it's not written in the first person and it's 4 or 5 separate things, this might have been better as a comic series.
Definitely better as a comic series. That's really what this should have been, because as we're going to get to later, there's another character in this named Nakiri, and I feel like she would be really well introduced in a comic series as well. And, Mike, I've got to throw out a shout out right here to the Star Wars Report podcast. I listened to their episode on this, and they said the same thing about this should be better as a comic book series. So it's really interesting you say that.
Great minds think alike. I'm sure that's what it is.
Yeah, and they had a really great review of this book if you guys want to listen to it. the both of them had dissenting opinions on this, very stark on both sides. So it's be a good episode to listen to get two opinions on if this is good or bad or necessary. So Mon Mothma and Ackbar give Luke a mission. And the mission is for the rebels to hide a family of an Imperial defector, basically. And then on top of that, they're still looking for a new rebel base, which seems to be a theme we see throughout these early books.
That's the quote-unquote main mission in the book, but they also want to secure Nakari's father's money. This is the first time we see the rebellion really worrying about funding. And Nakari is a cool character. She's got a cool ship that is described, pretty well.
And she's kind of Luke's liaison on this mission, right?
Well, his liaison partner. She's filling Han's role because for some reason Han is not in this book. I forget what their excuse was.
It was bizarre, yeah. They're like, he's dealing with something with smugglers and bounty hunters.
Yeah, so we find Luke, and he doesn't have, Han or Chewie with him. He is not, treated... And he's not treated badly, but he's, the hero of the rebellion who just recently blew up the Death Star. But now it's come to light that, you actually don't have military training or anything. Like, you are special, and we know that, but we have to figure out how to use you. Why don't you go get this dude's money?
Yeah, and Nakiri's pretty cool. She's a new character for this book. She's a great pilot, as Mike mentioned. She obviously catches Luke's attention right away. So that kind of tends to be a focus of this book, is that she becomes a crush for Luke. And I'm gonna use the term crush because that's the way the book treats it. So
that's absolutely right. So last week in our True Sets Bakura, we talked about Luke's first girlfriend. This is his first
Gariel.
Gariel.
This is his first crush.
This is his first crush in the canon timeline.
Oh my.
This one's worse, I think.
Yeah, it's much worse. Everything Mike said on Trusa Bakura that I was like, yeah, it's a little excessive. This is worse than this. So Luke is crushing on her in a very teenager way, which is unfortunate because, we know Luke's kind of nerdy and whiny and
extremely awkward.
But, he's 19 and a half, and we're assuming now at this point he's approaching 20 or he's at least 20. So for them to be treating him like he's a lot younger than that is just another strange decision they made in this book. But Nakiri is the daughter of a important, wealthy man, like you're talking about, Mike.
Yeah,
right?
her father is Fayette Kellen. Excuse me. Owner, founder, chief scientist of Kellen Biolabs. And Ackbar is interested in that Kellen Biolabs money to support the rebellion.
Yeah, which is really interesting. We've never seen it like this for the rebellion before, for the most part. A little more real world based and a little more sci-fi based than fantasy. So, yeah. So Nakiri is pretty impressed with Luke's use of the Force, or at least his knowledge, even though it's very minimal. I will mention, Mike, while we're here at this point, the way they coined this book was that it was going to be Luke learning more about the Force, us kind of seeing his progress between New Hope and Empire, which, is a lot, right? 3 years, 3.5 years, 3.5 years, something like that. And unfortunately, that's about 5% of this book is Luke actually using the Force in any way. So I'll throw that note here now because I think it's something else to look at more with the Marvel series, which is canonical as well, where it seems to be Luke uses the Force a little bit more, or at least he's trying to use it more. But she doesn't like Darth Vader either, Nakiri.
Well, and let's talk about why she doesn't like Darth Vader.
I don't know if I can...
You don't think you can do it? Well, okay, I'll do it.
This is pretty bad, Mike.
So we talked about her father.
It's comically bad.
Runs the biolab. The rebellion wants his money. We hear about Nakiri's mother.
Oh my gosh.
She was a musician.
You ready for the band?
And she had a group called the Hakko Drazlip and the Tootle Froots. TOOTLEFROOTS is the name of the band.
It's not good.
And they wrote a song called Vader's Many Prosthetic Parts.
Right.
People that haven't
speechless.
read this book think we're making this up, but this is something that Nakiri tells Luke. And essentially, the whole band was sent to the spice mines of Kessel 10 years before A New Hope.
To be made an example of.
Because of the song Vader's Many Prosthetic Parts by Hakko Drazlip and the Tootle Froots.
That song was too punk rock for the Empire. And they did not like the use of making fun of Vader's sensitive areas.
I think the name Hakko Drazlip and the Tootle Froots is too punk rock for punk rock.
Yeah. Oh, I agree. As somebody who enjoys punk rock, it's almost like a crime I'm saying this. But, okay, so this is clearly bad. It's a bad joke. It's a bad feature of this book. But, okay, so I'm going to try to examine this semi-logically, even though this is bad, Mike. This is worse than anything in the prequels. But if people want to go that route, I think what the author was trying to do, which I think was a mistake, but I think this is what he was trying to do. I think he was trying to ground Star Wars in reality today, maybe. Like, hey, look, when bands write punk rock songs, they write these anthems, these protests of government and leaders. Look at how it goes in the Star Wars universe. Number one, I think that's a mistake because Star Wars at its core is, fantasy and sci-fi and, just kind of.
I don't know, man. So many people love the politics of the prequels.
Yeah, I'm not going to engage that right now, but no, I just think it's too close to real world. I think it's like, hey, that thing in our world? Look at it in Star Wars. And on top of that, let's even engage that as an idea. Would Vader even care?
You've heard of that band Anti-Flag? Well, Hakko Drazlip and the Tootle Froots is the anti-flag of the Star Wars universe.
But would Vader care? Like if they wrote a song about Tarkin being terrible, would Tarkin care? I don't know. Like
Tarkin might.
Tarkin might, but would Vader? Tarkin has a political career, right?
Yeah.
Vader, no, he wouldn't care. And the fact that Vader and the Empire made an example of Nakiri's mother because she was a backup singer in a joke punk rock band, you know what I mean, called the Tootle Froots. It's almost like the guys snuck it in and they were just like, we need more content. All we got right now is Lords of the Sith and Tarkin. We need one more canonical book. Dude, it's bad. Yeah, you're right. People know about this and a moment that's coming up in a little bit that have not read this book. So that means something negative, probably. That this is known pretty well, right?
So Nakari's a cool character. Her parents are kind of lame.
Her backstory.
So on their first mission out,
right? They're going to check out the expedition, right?
No, they first go to not Ryloth because that's where the Twi'leks are from.
Rhodia.
They're trying to get the support of a rebel Rhodian faction.
That's right.
And there's some very poorly done political dialogue. But the reason I made sure that we started with this is there is an interesting Luke development here.
Okay.
I forget the name of the character he even meets where this happens, because, again, I don't have my book with me, and there's not just a searchable version on the internet that I found in my 2 minutes of searching. One of the Rhodians in this faction recognizes that he's a Jedi and talks about he had an uncle who was a Jedi back before the Purge and everything.
Right.
And his uncle almost escaped Order 66, but died in his spaceship on the way home. So when he returned to Rhodia, they found him dead in the spaceship. They made a little tomb or memorial to him.
Yeah. I think the guy's name was Hulk was the name of the Jedi.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
he, more importantly, this character tells Luke that, it's Sunta was the name of the character.
Yes, that's right.
Sunta, which was Hulk's niece, tells Luke, hey, my family, and she mentions Hulk, knew your dad, Anakin, and around the time of the Clone Wars. So, and that he was killed actually by Order 66, actually, is what happens with him.
That's what it was, yeah.
So,
But,
and Luke learns about this through this character.
And they go and visit this tomb. Luke is looking for any sort of exposure to the Force at this point because he hasn't heard from Ben since the Death Star Trench.
Mission number 1.
Yeah, that's right. Mission number 1. So they go. There's some wildlife that is. It's sort of described basically like this is in the middle of the Dagobah swamp again, which is pretty unoriginal.
Yeah.
But Hulk was buried with his lightsaber.
That's right.
And Luke takes the lightsaber. So he Indiana Joneses the family saber, but Sunta's cool with it. She's like, well, none of us are Jedi. We can't learn how to do that. So hopefully this can help you, which is a cool thing for her to do.
Right.
But they end up, Luke, they have to escape the fake Dagobah swamp again. And basically back at his hotel room, Luke is examining this fallen Jedi's lightsaber.
Yeah. He's pretty intrigued by it.
Luke was sitting at the desk that they give you in a Holiday Inn, with the lamp and phone charger combo. He was sitting there messing with this ancient lightsaber.
Right. After his busy day in the swamps of Rhodia, he's like, hey, I got given this lightsaber by this girl I just met who was like, hey, I heard about Anakin Skywalker. I mean, there's just a lot of weird coincidences in this, but that is the first part of the mission. You're right, Mike. So
yeah. I want to focus on this because this is presented as the first canon source that Luke finds another lightsaber in, and him and R2 try to deconstruct it to figure out how it works.
Yeah, which is very interesting. This falls on that 10% I mentioned earlier of the actual Luke leveling up Jedi stuff in this. Even though this is not really spiritually leveling up in any way like that, but it is knowledge about the Jedi that Luke doesn't know. Because we got to remember, this is the still 19, 20-year-old Luke post-trench run. That's it.
That's right. So I don't like everything that is described here. The author tries to explain in Star Wars basic terms the physics of a lightsaber.
Oh my. Yeah.
And
very sci-fi novel.
Power source, which is similar to a standard weapon in Star Wars. The Kyber crystal that we know of that focuses the energy.
Yes.
And it somehow focuses it. So the lightsaber is described as not being a solid beam of energy, but it's an arc. And the end of the lightsaber is the peak of the arc where it comes back to the blade, which is just horrifically stupid.
This is bad sci-fi writing.
Yeah, it's very
in Star Wars. In Star Wars, this is like describing a phaser or something.
Yeah, so it's like the lightsaber is actually an energy loop that's very steep, goes out and comes right back into the handle. But to his credit, it's not described as something Luke can immediately reproduce. This is he understands that there's a greater connection to the lightsaber through the Force that a Jedi has.
Yeah, and Luke says something like, I don't know how he learns this, Mike. I can't quite remember because this was early on in the book, but Luke mentions that, and that's how you put the crystal in, but you can only do that with the Force. You got to focus it and get it the correct way in there. And I don't know how Luke learned that, but that's mentioned
I think
it was
just the precision of the way it had to be done to make it work could only be through the Force.
Right.
I think is how it was described.
Yeah, and in this first person view in this book, Luke's like, man, oh golly, I couldn't do that, and that sort of thing. So there we are. But so Luke kind of comes to that conclusion. But yeah, you're right. It's important to know this. This is canonical. Luke's first experience with the lightsaber, similar to what we looked at in Shadows of the Empire, something like that. Okay, so then Luke and Nakiri are led to information that leads them to the first part of their next mission, which involves them learning about the survey team of Nakiri's father's work and what happened to them and where they're at. So Luke and Nakiri go there, and when they get there, it's something out of like a 70s or 80s sci-fi horror. They discover the team was slaughtered by these creatures, which we don't know yet. And Nakiri's like, I knew this guy. I knew this guy. I knew this guy. Like, they're all her father's coworkers and friends, and she's kind of horrified by it. And then Luke feels the presence of something strange, and him and Nakiri, I'm not making this up, Mike, but they get attacked by invisible brain-eating bugs. And
That's right. Invisible brain-eating bugs, but I think you left out a crucial detail. Aren't they? Isn't this the part where they're wearing the big, bulky spacesuits?
oh, yeah. Very similar to Alien or something. So
Yeah, so the author is straight trying to rip off Alien.
yeah.
Like the feel.
Yeah, and in Alien, of course, we have the face huggers that leave the egg inside your body. I mean, it's very similar. These brain-eating bugs are jumping on the outside of their suits and clawing their way in. Luke can feel their presence, but he can't see them. He can feel some sort of presence. What's really interesting is this is one of those leveling up moments. Luke has never really felt the presence of something before, other than just kind of reaching out and feeling the Force. So
I guess that's true. Yeah.
in this, we kind of see him feeling the presence of these invisible life forms. It's a really poor way of the story showing us that, like, hey, these things are invisible, but he can sense them. This is him leveling up. So Luke kills a few of them with the lightsaber.
His lightsaber, not the fallen Jedi.
Yes, the legacy saber, the Anakin lightsaber, and they find a strange ancient journal, which I'm not really sure, Mike, what happens the rest of the story with it, because I don't recollect anything the rest of the story happening. But they get this journal.
So to give our listeners some context, right about here is where I'd left off and then left my copy of the book at my parents' house, and
That means you're going to resolve
so
on
from
me.
here on out, I have very little detail. Jesse is a very dedicated Star Wars reader. He reads something once, he remembers it forever. You've gotten that at this point. He's brought up minor points in other stories that he read back when we were like 8 years old. It has taken him a month to slog through this book, and he can't remember anything that happened. I think like that is a testament to. Like, I'm not trying to rip on the author Kevin Hearn, because he's a published author. I've never written anything. He's
Yeah, you probably shouldn't have read Star Wars. That's probably the biggest.
Yeah, he maybe should have stuck to that other genre. But to see Jesse struggle to get through and retain this has been an entertaining experience in itself.
Thanks for that, Mike. Yeah. Well, not only am I a big fan of Star Wars, but
That's not a shot at you. That's a shot at
no, you're right. I'm also a huge fan of writing and literature. Not that I'm capable of it either, but man, the writing in this was a slog. It's like the story is obviously incongruent with itself. And like we mentioned before, it's like 4 or 5 mini missions that are kind of jammed together. Like Luke and Nakiri just going on to the next place. Here's your next mission. Here's your next quest. So that's a problem.
Admiral Ackbar, the quest giver.
Yeah.
I have a question mark above my head.
But pair that with terrible writing and strange teeny bopper Luke first person perspective. Like, this is not 19 or 20-year-old Luke. This is like 14-year-old Luke. Who's
and again, pair that with Hakko Drazlip and the Tootle Froots.
That's unbelievable. I can't believe that's in this book. That's canonical.
I'm gonna rename the podcast the Hakko Drazlip and the Tootle Froots Cantina.
Yeah, we need to tweet some things just about that band, because I want to know and just show Jar Jar shaking his head or something.
I will do that in the lead up to this episode. That's a good idea.
Boss Nass doesn't even like this band, but he's offended. But yeah, Vader's mini prosthetic limbs, that might be my new password or something. Or mine something. It's too good. But so they go on this. So we've had a sci-fi horror element now. Eventually they find out from this mission that her dad went on that there was a defector. Okay. So they reach the world. Now we're on the next quest where they find the world where the defector is located. And at this point, Luke and Nakiri, similar to maybe Anakin and Padme, I'll give the author that, they do a lot of flying from quest to quest in their ship. And Luke and Nakiri are having meals together. They're having conversations together. Luke's crushing on her like a 13 or 14-year-old.
Don't worry about how they got off the invisible brain-eating monster planet. They just did.
They get past it. I'm trying.
It really is like a video game level though, because they get to the end, they get the item.
Yeah, that's true.
And then they just kind of leave.
Yeah, and Luke cuts a couple things, and she's like, "Whoa, you know how to use a lightsaber?" He's like, "Not really." But they have a couple moments together, romantic YA moments. So now, Mike, we have another part coming up, which I literally caused me to drop the book, and I had to go take a break. But you know, this is the kind of stuff that makes like Attack of the Clones look not as bad.
Damn.
And this is, but it's similar. It's similar tone. Okay, it's similar tone. Imagine if Anakin and Padme were a little bit younger and a little bit younger, kind of preteen, early teen, and their banter in Attack of the Clones. That's the kind of scene we have between Nakiri and Luke. This is a grown woman in her 20s, right? And this is who the book we didn't say yet. The book is fairly vague on how she looks, but it says she has darker skin. She has curly hair. She's taller than Luke. The book does make that clear. So,
but she is established as a like successful, like, you know,
grown woman,
competent person.
And they're kind of just crushing on each other and like flirting. And Luke's really bad at the flirting. And they bring up the Force again and how much she hates Darth Vader. And Luke's like talking about the Force. And they have this moment where. This is one of the leveling up moments, Mike, that I have a hard time talking about, but she basically says, well, if you're a Jedi, can't you move things around with your mind? And Luke's like, no, I can't do that. And then you have this whole inner dialogue with Luke struggling with, is that what Jedi do? Do I know how to do that? And they're having
lifting rocks.
Yeah, they're having some sort of Star Wars noodles, which the way the book described them, they just sounded like ramen to me. So they're having
space ramen.
They're having space ramen, and she asks him to move the noodle in her bowl.
Giggity.
Okay, and this is with really strange teen dialogue. I'm making it sound better, even though I'm having a hard time saying this. So what she says is, move the noodle for me, and then Luke reaches out. Okay, you're just dying. Luke moves the noodle. Hopefully we'll never have an episode this rough again, hopefully. Luke moves the noodle, and she goes, well, aren't you a little noodle scooter? And then Luke blushes and doesn't know what to say, and he's like, maybe I am a Jedi. And that's how that scene ends. So guys, forget the Wampa, forget the adrenaline of the Wampa, making Luke use his first element of telekinesis. He scooted those noodles a few times.
Jedi professional noodle scooter.
So Luke's official first use of the Force in this way was on a date with a pretty woman who talks like a child. And told him to scoot her noodles around. I'm just speechless. This is canonical, Mike. We're here. We made it.
Yeah. So well, going off of that, I have been a staunch defender of everything that's new canon.
I know.
Because there's not a lot of it compared to the expanded universe Legends stuff.
And the Legends started getting strongly diluted, right? Because of that, right?
Right. Legends had 30 years to build up books. Some are great, some are absolutely terrible, and a lot of them fall somewhere in between. This is the first absolutely terrible thing we've got in the new Star Wars canon since 2015.
Right. And I mean, I'm ecstatic, Mike, to read the Crystal Star. Before it was just more just to see the pain you would go through, but now it's now we're going to compare this to Heir to the Jedi. We're going to see which one's worse, you know? Are werewolves worse, or is noodle scooters and Vader's mini prosthetic limbs? I mean, seriously, these are real things. So hopefully we can find some comedy in our misery. But so that's how Luke, and also another thing I had to mention, which really did bother me about the book, is the author refers to it as telekinesis several times. And I'm not sure that's been done in Star Wars before, at least with the word telekinesis. I'm not sure. I don't remember.
This is referencing just a sort of off-air conversation that we had, but I'm like 95% sure that in Legends, it was referred to sometimes as telekinesis,
But-
specifically,
but
around
rarely.
just describing Corran Horn and
Right.
how he couldn't do it unless it was in certain circumstances. But I think the word telekinesis was used.
Yeah, just rarely. Yeah, and we'll get to Cornhorn later, but yeah, you're right. He has a ineptitude in that area. So I don't know, but it's still strange that they're talking about it together. Like, hey, Jedi's use telekinesis, right? Like in conversation, and Luke's like, do they?
Lifting rocks, Jedi move noodles.
No, Mike, they scoot noodles.
Scoot noodles, excuse me.
You little noodle scooter. I'm gonna start
If
saying that all
only-
the time.
If only when in the Last Jedi, when Rey is like the forces of power that Jedi use to lift rocks and stuff, and Luke says, "No, we scoot noodles."
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So then there's some other stuff that happens, but again, I am out of the full loop here because I didn't want to buy the book twice.
Oh wait, I wrote down one more quote about the noodle scooter. Okay.
Okay, my bad. My bad.
Fine, move the noodle. Luke says, "What, here?" "Yes, look at it, Luke. It's utterly lacking in strength, for it has been boiled into complete submission for you."
Oh, now I'm sad that I didn't get that far.
That's at the noodle bar. They had a noodle bar date on the way to their next quest. Okay.
Noodle bars.
So, it's called Saket's Noodles on the planet Danon. So there.
Hey, words like Star Wars descriptions. Cool.
So, anyways, the noodle scooter scene's over, but that was an important scene in this book because Luke really it was important to Luke's character. So he leveled up.
So, for the mercy of our listeners and ourselves, there's really only one more important scene in this book, right?
Oh, at the very end?
Yeah, because there's 2 or 3 more missions where quest giver Ackbar or quest giver Mon Mothma sends them places. Like they're trying to rescue this code breaker, who is a given, which is Givin, one of my actual favorite looking species in Star Wars. They're trying to rescue this. She's referred to as a cryptographer, would be a code breaker in Last Jedi terms, perhaps. Drusil Beforin. These people basically have melted skulls for faces.
Yes.
Sort of reminds me of the old 80s Masters of the Universe movie. And
Totally.
what Skeletor looked like.
Yeah, a little bit of the Day of the Dead stuff, and you actually see a given in the Mos Eisley Cantina for the first time. So that's worth mentioning. And you're right, they do get this this character to help them on their next quest. And once again, the book makes an odd choice here, but the character mainly speaks in math and math equations because they're brilliant in mathematics. And the book goes on a long tangent, kind of like Mike said earlier with the science tangent on the lightsaber. Goes on a tangent just to fill time about the knowledge of math of this character.
It really is. There's a lot of things that just feel like he's trying to fill pages here.
Yeah, for sure. So, but they go on the mission after this, and where do we want to go next after this, Mike? You're right. I mean, I know what you're talking about. Where the important point at the end with the bounty hunters.
Let's just fast. I don't know if they find her dad or whatever, but there's the important scene.
They do find her dad, and her dad's a quite comedic character, for better or for worse. I think he's one of the characters that works better, but they do find her dad. So, and once again, the Kiri and Luke, this whole time, are growing much closer. Luke's starting to get more confidence around her. He's starting to get less like a 12-year-old or 13-year-old boy, but more like a man, like he is, like a 20-year-old. And
so on a scale of
they have one kiss. They have one kiss.
Oh, that's worse than the last one. On the scale of walking carpet to general hugs, where does this fall on the comedic scale?
Which part's comedic?
Her father. You said he was kind of a comedic character.
Oh man, probably closer to the general hugs. I mean, he's boisterous. He's fun. It's a little out of place, but it's not jarring. And he's one of the better written characters in this, alongside Nakiri. Luke, in fact, is written terribly in this. I think Nakiri is the best character in this book, and her dad's fine too. Do I?
Based on the third of the book I read, I agree with that.
It just doesn't. we're not getting anything of Luke. We're just getting a recount of the things he thought during New Hope from a first person's perspective. And it done in a more childish tone, which doesn't really seem like actually like the Luke we know, because in theory, this Luke should be turning into the Empire Luke, which is a different Luke.
Well, let's mercy kill this. Let's get to the last the last part that's important to Luke as a character. I know we haven't done a good job of sticking to our
standard format,
to our format and our questions, but I guess we can address that some at the end. It's just this story is so disjointed and yeah.
No, it doesn't make any sense. It's them going from quest to quest, like Mike said, and there are little dates in between. That's really all you guys need to know, because they have these little quips and dates in between their quests, noodle scooting, things like that. So talking about
I'm gonna laugh every time.
Talking about Vader's many prosthetic parts. Okay, I do want to mention one interesting thing, Mike, that I think is probably the most important part of the story before we get to this final climax for Luke's character. So when they talk about the punk rock band thing and Vader's many prosthetic parts and how much Nakiri just hates Vader, she hates him. And Luke basically, he doesn't defend Vader and he's not necessarily compassionate towards Vader, but he's basically saying, like, I don't know him in a way. Like, it's an interesting take on Luke, but Luke's basically saying, Luke basically says, like, he's a bad guy and that's really all I know. He betrayed my father, but he knows how to use the Force, and somehow that ties us together, and that's all I'm going off of right now.
That sounds like somebody who has watched the original trilogy going back and writing for Luke, that
for sure
Luke eventually knows and cares and stuff.
Yeah, at this point, Luke doesn't know Vader's his father. He doesn't even know much about Vader at all. He just encountered Vader in the trench. And presumably this is even before the Marvel comics, which are now canonical, where he encounters Vader as well. So for him, he's saying, well, yeah, I mean, and I preface with this because Nakiri says we should just kill him. He should die. Someone should kill him. I hope the Rebel Alliance kills him. Somebody. And Luke's like, well, really, should he die? Like, should he be questioned or captured first? And Nakiri's like, no, he just needs to die. And it looks like, I'm not sure he should. I don't really know the guy. You know what I mean? And so that was an interesting, that was probably the best part of this whole book. So I liked that, Mike, personally, because it does showcase the Luke we see more in Empire and definitely Jedi. It's kind of like,
I agree with you.
He gives people the benefit
based on what
of the
you've
doubt.
told me. He shouldn't be that way with Vader at this point, because he saw Vader kill Ben Kenobi at most weeks ago.
Yeah, like I said, it's not compassionate. It's just, I don't know. It's him saying he's kind of in the middle ground when it comes to killing Vader. He's saying he definitely should be captured. He definitely should atone for his crimes, but he doesn't know if Vader should be killed, which is, you're right, inconsistent with the Luke we see, I assume, shortly after this in the Marvel comics, which if you guys listen to our show, I was
going to make this same exact point.
The first couple of Marvel comics, he's like, I want you dead because what you did to my father figure, Ben Kenobi. So it's inconsistent, but it's still interesting to me because it does give a glimpse of the return and Empire Luke, but I don't know. It's just something worth mentioning.
You're right. That is worth mentioning.
She just wants to have Vader killed, and Luke kind of defends he should be captured and trialed first, that sort of thing.
Should anybody in Star Wars be redeemed, they need to go on trial. All these people talking about redeeming Kylo Ren, who forget that he killed 5 planets at the same time. How do you go on trial?
Mike's gonna beat this horse. I love it.
I will beat this dead horse until episode 9 comes out. So let's drag this thing out behind the shed and just put it out of its misery. I know there's one more important thing that happens in terms of Luke's development. Let's just get it over with so we can get to the fun stuff.
Yeah. So Luke and Nakiri escape, and they make their way to this rendezvous point on the last mission. And they're protecting this family, and they're ambushed by bounty hunters. And I got to mention, as a fan of bounty hunters, at least it was cool. Some name dropping, as in these were generic bounty hunters, but Trandoshans, and Alkalish bounty hunters, which are pretty consistent with the original trilogy. And the bounty hunters are competent. They're good. They kill people. They kill some people in the family. Nakiri is sniping, and Luke is fighting them on the ground with his blaster. And you know what happens, Mike, next? Nakiri has a off-screen death.
Oh my God, I didn't realize it was off screen.
And it's not off screen in the fullest extent, but it's 100% not on screen. So what happens is she's sniping, Luke's on the ground. These bounty hunters throw grenades up at her, and she's presumably some long distance away, and Luke feels her life force go out. And by the time Luke gets over there, she's gone. That's it. She's just gone. This compelling character, Luke's first crush, Luke's first noodle scooting experience, all these things. It's over. So and I told this story to my wife. I got to mention this. My wife's really brilliant when it comes to literature. And I was kind of venting this book as I went through it, Mike, to her. And I said, the most interesting character in the book and Luke's love interest, they just kill her kind of semi off screen. And I don't know what to do with that. And she goes, well, you know what that is, right? And I said, no, I don't. She goes, an author writes a death off screen of a major character that the entire book revolved around. That just means that they didn't feel confident enough to write it in a face-to-face interaction with the other character. So they, and I said, that's not good, but that's probably
in the hammer cage.
Yeah, that's probably true. So this is a loss for Luke, and this is important canonically because this was his first girlfriend, but it's unfortunate they don't have a moment. I don't think she necessarily needed a Boromir moment, something like that, where it's like this epic death and Luke's cradling her and she's saying, keep learning about the Force and maybe we shouldn't, maybe Vader should be redeemed. I don't know, or something, whatever. But just her dying to a grenade in the distance and Luke kind of not seeing it happen, it seems like a misstep. I don't know, because it's his first crush, girlfriend, whatever it was.
Right, but doesn't this fuel Luke to be able to do something else?
Yeah. So let's talk about that. So probably one of the better parts of the book here we got to mention. Luke gets angry about this, about her death, and he feels cold come on his body. He feels a veil being pulled over his eyes in some ways. That's why I was described. And he literally feels like Superman for a second. That's how it's described in the book. He feels like he is supercharged. He feels like he's super strong, and that he feels cold and he feels kind of numb to emotions. And we're presuming that's the dark side. And Luke resists it, which is consistent with the Luke we see at this point in the story. He pushes it away, but he does have this moment of the dark side coming on him when she dies to this grenade.
I don't know if that is consistent, because I think this is maybe the first time that
he would feel the dark side.
Has experienced the dark side. And we know that in Return of the Jedi, he is tempted by the dark side for a little bit there in that final confrontation.
100%.
He does give in to that aggression. So that's interesting.
I don't know. The description is decently done. The feeling of cold and death and emotionlessness, that kind of thing. Some of it echoes stuff in the prequels and just also what Luke experiences when he goes to the cave, right? He says, I feel cold, I feel death. And Yoda says, that place is full of the dark side. Your weapons, you will not need them, but I need you to go in there. And this is interesting. This is actually decent because this isn't that 5 to 10%, like I said, about Luke Force stuff. Unfortunately, 95% of this book is just kind of using Luke as a moniker of a character running around doing quests. You know what I mean? And it's unfortunate because this is a true Luke thing that's compelling in this story. And his first kind of experience feeling that. And Luke, since this is first person, when he shakes it off, he kind of describes it to the reader the way he felt, if that makes sense, which is something we've never really experienced before, at least not in a literal first person way. We get a little bit of this in I, Jedi, which is the Core and Horn book way off in the future, but it's, it's unique to this story. So that's something.
That's fair.
So I don't know. It's interesting, but it's still poorly written. So the book kind of ends with her death and Luke getting back from the mission. And we really didn't make a lot of progress story-wise at all. We were introduced a character that was compelling, who was interested in Luke, and they kind of had a thing going. They had a kiss. She challenged Luke in different ways.
And then she died.
So this is clearly one of those time filler books. It's not really doing much for the story. And of course, Mike, you mentioned it earlier, but I'm going to mention again. Han and Leia are not in this story. And that's a huge problem. I will mention Leia's in it once, and it's one of those really weird dates that Luke's on with Nakiri. And Nakiri kind of shows that she has interest in Luke, and Luke kind of does this weird flirting move where he basically says, "Look, I kind of have a thing with this princess, so I don't know if I can get involved with you," basically. And he kind of hurts Nakiri's feelings. He also mentioned that he has this thing for the princess that's like one of the leaders of the rebellion. So she's like, how do I live up to that? And it's just strange. It's strange. We all know Luke does have a thing for Leia at this time, but it's like, was that necessary, Luke? Would Luke do that? I don't know. I don't really know.
So the story is not good. Let's go back to our questions for just a minute. We've talked about Luke at the beginning. How do the events and characters of this story impact Luke's development throughout the overall Star Wars story? They don't, right?
No. I mean, I guess Luke's loss of losing his first girlfriend is important, but
it's not something we ever see again, or at least we haven't yet, right?
Right. Maybe it'll come up in the Marvel comics or something. I doubt it, but maybe it will. As of right now, no, nothing. That's unfortunate, of course.
Yeah, so
it feels like a waste of time.
This book kind of is a waste of time.
Oh, it is.
So our third question, does this fit with the Luke we meet in The Last Jedi? No, not really, right?
I don't think so. I don't think this fits with much.
I mean, I'm trying not to let my love of The Last Jedi influence me here, but I don't see any of this in Old Man Luke at all. Do you?
No, I mean, Old Man Luke's kind of jaded. Maybe this is one of the many things that made him jaded. He lost
that could be
a girlfriend. He had a brush with the dark side at a young age, early on in his journey. But I don't know. Honestly, there's not enough Luke stuff here, and maybe partially the author was bound by that constricting element, which I think is always really tough, which is here's a movie, here's other characters in this movie, here's other characters in this movie. All right, fill the gap.
And if this was written after episode 7 came out or something, I could maybe agree with that. But this was before the Disney acquisition of Lucasfilm.
Well, I'm just trying to give the guy a benefit of the doubt that he felt bound by Empire and New Hope. He clearly didn't do enough. And, we just did Shadows of the Empire a while ago, and there's clearly more Luke stuff in that, even though Luke's kind of takes a back seat as a character because we have other characters like Lando, Shizor, Vader, Leia.
You're right. Luke grows more in that Legends book, Shadows of the Empire, where he's
multi-character book.
A second or third tier character in the overall story,
right?
Than he does in this, that is literally written from his point of view.
Only him. We're only in his brain the entire book. Yeah. So there's the questions, Mike.
Yeah. So don't read Heir to the Jedi. It's not good. It's not worth your time. Let's break away from this. Let's get to some of the fun stuff. Let's jet on over to the HoloNet.
All right.
And now for a HoloNet News exclusive.
So here in the HoloNet, we talk about news. Usually news makes us happy. This news made me upset because nobody put a spoiler tag or just a link. They just put these pictures up on Twitter, and I try to avoid stuff like this. Jesse, what am I talking about?
Talking about the leaked set photos, Mike, right? Of Finn, Poe, and Chewbacca from Star Wars Episode 9.
Yeah, and they're standing on a grassy hill. Finn's got longer hair. I mean, I've seen him now, so I'm going to talk about him. Chewie's standing up by some fuzzy space horses.
Yeah. Yeah.
In
And
one
it's
of
like
these
a grass-filled planet. Maybe, you never know. Probably a new planet. Could be Dantooine, something like that. You're right. We don't need to know this information. Finn's got a whole new outfit. I'm loving it. It's very Han Solo-esque. He's got some.
It's Han Solo-esque without him actually wearing Han's old clothes that were on the Falcon.
Not like Lando. Yeah, he's got some blue pants with a stripe down the side, very similar to the Han Solo blood stripe. Then he's got a brown-ish shirt and then a tan vest. And then he has a gunslinger gun on the side and the classic Han Solo riding boots that are brown as well. So once again, all the Han-looking pieces, but include different colors, different style. And then Pose looks the same way. We got some Luke Skywalker, Han Solo clothes elements. And when I say Luke Skywalker, I mean the Luke from Empire, the more utilitarian, mini pockets on the shirts and pants, things like that.
And then there's Jonas up in his Chewie costume, still just rocking the bandolier and the bowcaster or big blaster. I don't know
horses.
if these horses, they've got orange stuff on their face and head, so I don't know if that means that's like
that's mocap, man. It's
like
be
mocap
something.
stuff. Like I said, I don't like seeing stuff like this anyway, and now that we have seen them, it just makes me mad because I don't know, after seeing the fathers in Last Jedi, as much as I loved it, I don't know if I want to see Star Wars horses in Episode 9, but we'll see, I guess. If you just search, the page I'm looking at is Star Wars Legacy. That was the first one on Twitter that I saw these pictures on. If you want to go see them, just search for them.
Set images of Finn and Poe. Yeah.
Which these aren't giving away anything of the story, which is good. People usually are better about like spoiler tags and posting links instead of pictures for stuff like that. But I just tried to go in not knowing anything about these new movies.
Yeah, but you're right. That happened, so that's news. The big news I want to talk about, Mike, because I'm really excited about this. I don't know if you are, because we haven't actually spoken about this in person yet, but Dominic Monaghan and Matthew Smith joined the cast of Star Wars Episode 9, which are two, I would say, major string UK actors, especially on the A- B string, if you want to call them that. They're not A level like someone like a Ewan McGregor or something like that, but these are popular guys with solid fan bases.
I hate to break it to you, but Matt Smith is more A level than Ewan McGregor these days.
Yeah, but I don't think his pay grade is. So
he was the doctor. Come on.
Hey, The Crown. Don't forget that.
Never watched it. Don't care about it.
Well, we were talking about the budgets last episode, right?
That's true,
so I'm going to mention that the fact that he was on The Crown probably helped him. Of course, he was the doctor and was very successful at that. And
he's my wife's favorite doctor.
Oh, really? Interesting. I'm thinking that these guys, I don't know. When I saw this news, I was thrilled because I love both these guys, and I'm a huge Lord of the Rings fan with Dominic, and obviously he's worked with JJ and Lost, right? So there's some parallels there, and I think Matt Smith's worked with a lot of the same people that work at Pinewood Studios with all these British productions like The Crown and things like that. So it makes perfect sense. I mean, they know all the right people.
Yeah. So obviously there's been all sorts of speculation about who they're going to be. Are they going to be the Knights of Ren? Are they going to be First Order officers because they're British and that's the fate all British actors are doomed to? Could they be in the Resistance? My feeling is they're just background stormtroopers.
Oh man.
No, that's probably not right, but Daniel Craig was a stormtrooper and he's
oh my gosh,
as big or bigger name than these guys are.
No. As much as I like these guys, I feel like they're going to fill more of a role like DJ did in The Last Jedi. That's a side character that you recognize their face. They play a unique side character, but they're not going to be like, I would assume they're not going to be up there with, Finn and Poe and Rey and Kylo and stuff, right? Screen time wise.
I mean, I could see them maybe being like fighter pilots with Poe or something. But that still wouldn't make them, main characters. That would put them on like the Greg Grunberg.
So just shooting from the hip, Dominic, good guys, Matt Smith, bad guys, vice versa. Flip it.
Flip it.
Okay, Matt Smith, good guys. Dominic, bad guys. I like it.
Yeah, but know that as soon as these spoilers got posted or these photos, people are like, "Oh, Thrawn and Ezra, blah blah blah." No, Thrawn and Ezra will not be in this movie. Stop talking about them. If there's any mercy in the universe, we will never see those characters again. But we absolutely won't see them in Episode 9.
No, as much as I'd like to see something involving Thrawn, which to me, Mike, seems more likely that Thrawn would be on the live action show than anything.
And I could maybe get behind that, but it just makes it makes no narrative sense to put such built up characters like Thrawn or Ezra into the third act of a series that is not about
How would
them.
these guys even play those characters? I mean, aren't they too young? Both of them too young?
Hey man, Peter Cushing is dead and he was in Rogue One.
I understand.
Okay?
I understand. This is dumb. This is dumb.
The too old, too young argument doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, it's too much. Yeah, they're going to be side characters, guys. And if you guys followed our bonus episode about the Resistance diversion and the talk about the way the sequel trilogy treats aliens, I think the sequel trilogy is trying to be equally opportunistic and new to young people that have seen nothing, have not seen the 6 episodes up to that. So why would they throw in characters that are not even from the 6 episodes, right? Not from the prequels or the original trilogy, right?
It would be cool if one or both of them were playing aliens, like Simon Pegg was on Car
That'd
Plot.
be nice.
That could be cool.
Yeah. Bridge some weird gap with Weta Workshops and Pinewood Studios and I don't know, Lord of the Rings and Star Wars and something. Get it going. So, because
anyway, it's cool that they're in there. I'm not even going to try to guess what roles they're playing.
I'm excited. That's all I care about. So,
and then just the last little bit of news that we wanted to talk about this week was a story off of Star Wars Newsnet.com and off of Twitter. Rian Johnson basically confirming he is still working on his trilogy of Star Wars movies, which makes me super happy because I'm still going to talk about it again this episode. He has read the words, the Canon Cantina podcast. He liked one of the tweets.
It's true.
Can die happy now. But he is working on what I'm calling the new original trilogy, the OT for a new generation. But yeah, the haters of Last Jedi, so many people, not even so many people, a lot of people don't like it, and that's fine. A lot of people hate it for no good reason and keep coming up with these rumors about it being about the new trilogy being canceled. It's not. He's still working on it with Rom Bergman, his producer. We'll see it in a few years, and I hope it's good.
Oh yeah, and truthfully, Mike, I'm much more excited to see Ryan do a new trilogy within his own universe world, separated by years, all this stuff, than take like we did with the sequel trilogy where he had to fill some gaps between the original trilogy and this new trilogy. I think him having his own contained story, it'll make more sense with his style. So I think I'll like it better than I liked The Last Jedi because he's not filling gaps.
It'll still be Star Wars, but he won't be constrained by existing characters or the end of episode 7 that was given to him by JJ.
Yeah, exactly. And for the haters and skeptics out there, he won't be touching Luke or Snoke or any of those things you're offended by. So, you know what I mean? Like if it's going to be completely his own story in a different timeline or whatever, it makes a lot more sense. So I'm excited. And a new trilogy of Star Wars. Come on. Come on. That's not tied to the Skywalker lineage. Even better. So, Mike, I want to talk about our polls this week.
That's right. So that's the end of our news. We're going to run over and talk to a strange computer.
Why don't we just go into light speed? We can't. How would you know the hyperdrive is deactivated? The city's central computer told you. R2-D2, you know better than to trust a strange computer.
So, guys, this is a double poll episode. Because of the way things worked out with our new bonus episode we gave you guys. We hope you guys enjoyed that. And we hope you guys also enjoyed Bakura. But let's talk about our polls this week, Mike. We have 2. So we had a poll about Favreau's show. So let's talk about what we wrote in the poll and what you guys said.
That's right. So I believe the service has been revealed to be called Disney Play. I think I saw something about that a couple days ago, but not 100% certain on that. But the Disney streaming service is going to have the live-action Star Wars show, which is directed at least partly and kind of overseen by Jon Favreau. And our question was, rumors about Favreau's show indicate that the series will be focused on Mandalore, the home of the Mandalorians. Do you want to see a show centered there, or do you have Mando fatigue and want to see the show focused elsewhere?
Okay.
And I gave 4 options and then let people comment. The options were Mandalorians all the way. I made the second option Rey Sloane, who is a central figure in the Aftermath novels of the new canon, and she's just a fantastic character. Third option was centered around a fighter squadron, similar to like the old Rogue Squadron books from the Legends continuity. And I just kind of took a shot in the dark with the last one, the Dameron family, like when Poe was growing up or something, because we have
some comics
about his parents. Nobody voted for that one, which is fine. I just kind of made that one up.
Okay, so we have 58% of the poll results. Poll results were Mandalore all the way, Mike. So that's about 60% of people that were interested in this Mandalorian story. Then we got 8% Rey Sloane. I'm very interested to meet that 8% of people. And then we have 33% of our poll was for a fighter squadron and 0% Poe's family.
Yeah, and we did have one comment I wanted to read. He's commented on our other polls before. Alessio Pascali, he's in Mandalore all the way, along with most of the other people who responded. And I get that people like Mandalorians. I fall in the Mando fatigue category after having Mandalorians in the Clone Wars and then Sabine and Rebels. It's not all bad by any means. I just don't know that that's what I want to see a show centered around.
I think the biggest thing, Mike, with the Mandalorians, especially in the canonical universe, is the more I learn about them, the less interesting and mysterious they get.
That's the whole drawback of it doesn't happen with just like Mandalorians, but just the more you learn about something,
Jedi.
the more you learn about something, the less mysterious and maybe less interesting it is. It's probably possible to actually put all 3 of our first options, Mandalore, Rey Sloane, and the Fighter Squadron, in the same show.
I would love that. Oh, man. And I got to mention, too, Mike, with Rey Sloane, I don't know if you remember this, but this is in the new canon. We have a book called A New Dawn.
Oh, that's right.
And that's actually, that's her first appearance. So that's in the pre-Rebels TV show timeline of Star Wars. And that's when she's just a captain, I believe. And then we fast forward all the way 30 years almost to the end, post Return of the Jedi timeline, right? And she's become an admiral of the Imperial Remnant in the Aftermath series.
And she is essentially the person responsible for taking the last remaining Imperials and turning them into the First Order. So she's a fantastic character, first created by Chuck Wendig in the Aftermath series, but then used again in that New Dawn series. You're right. So thanks to everybody who responded to that poll.
Yeah, definitely. I'm really excited about this live action show, Mike. I think it's probably I'm literally just as excited about it as I am everything else. Star Wars coming out soon. I'm just thrilled by the idea of a live action Star Wars show.
We've talked about it for so
new.
long. George having 50 scripts that he was sitting on and all that stuff.
Yes. Yeah. It's cool. It's finally happening.
Yeah. So we're catching up on our polls from a couple of weeks here. The next one is other than Luke, you can only have one more Forced Ghost in episode 9. Who is it? And your choices were Anakin, played by Hayden Christensen, Obi-Wan, played by Ewan McGregor, Yoda, played by Frank Oz Puppet, or Qui-Gon, played by Liam.
Ooh, man. I've never been so torn on one of our polls, Mike. So I had a hard time voting on this one, but let's go and talk about the percentages here. 60% of you guys out there want to see Anakin in Star Wars Episode 9.
And I actually think I'm in that boat.
I am too, believe it or not, with these other choices I have here. These are like 4 of my favorite people in Star Wars. 23 of you guys want to do Obi-Wan, Ewan's portrayal of Obi-Wan. 11% want the puppet Yoda, like we saw in The Last Jedi, which I think, Mike, we're probably going to get him again no matter what. But
We
you
might.
never know.
I did want to limit the question to if you could only have one, who would it be?
And 6% of you guys are out there on the semi-gray side, the Qui-Gon, Liam Neeson lovers, and I'm right there with you too, man. I love Qui-Gon, and it'd just be cool to see him come back. It wouldn't even be as shocking as Maul, you know? Like, people would probably... It would be in that same realm. It would make less sense, but I think it would go over better than even Maul did. In
You know,
Solo.
I think you're right because it was established later in Episode 3 that Qui-Gon was the first to return from the netherworld of the Force. So yeah,
Right, and he does it in Clone Wars as well, right? So,
yeah. So the reason your choices were these four is, along with Luke, these should be the only four Jedi that actually have learned that ability to come back as Force ghosts. Am I right?
you're so right, and we have a unique thing here, Mike, where we could have Hayden and Ewan come back and play the semi-younger versions of Sebastian Shaw and Alec Guinness.
Well, you gotta
and I think it could work.
You have to remember, Sebastian Shaw is not canon anymore. In the canon storyline,
That's a good way to point it.
Hayden Christensen shows up at the end of Return of the Jedi as Force Ghost Anakin.
Right, and that's a conversation for another time. But you know, Sebastian is the Vader we see,
But he's not
passes
the
away.
Force Ghost that we see.
Right. But I personally think, Mike, this would be, if this was done well, Ewan or Hayden talking to Kylo Ren or Rey or someone in Star Wars Episode 9 could be my favorite moment in all of Star Wars if it was done well. You know what I mean? And I know we've talked about this a lot. We talked about this on David's show, Followers of the Force. We talked about this extent with him. And if you guys haven't listened to that, please go listen to that interview on his show where he talks with us about Force Ghosts and he talks about Anakin coming back. And we go on quite a long tangent about this, Mike. And I just think it could bring all three trilogies together in a strong way and not in a ham-fisted way.
Yeah, definitely.
And it makes sense with the story, especially if we're bringing the Skywalker story to an end. And Kylo, Ben Solo is that last Skywalker element. What we've been led to believe, at least. I don't think Rey is. So if that was brought to a head or finished by one of these other Force ghosts talking to him alongside Luke, it'd be great.
Yeah, well, and that leads right into the some of the comments that we got. The science fictionary at sci_fictionary said that I think that an encounter between Kylo and Anakin's Force Ghost could have the biggest impact on the story, though I still maintain that I want to see the five sitting in council together, which I think everyone is in agreement with that. That would be so freaking cool.
Woo! Yeah, I want to go to that heaven. So,
I mean, even if that like weakens the story, I think pretty much everybody will forgive that. Oh, hey, they're all there with Luke and Rey and everything. That'd be so cool.
oh, the audience would nerd out. I think even people that are not big Star Wars fans would recognize Liam and Ewan and Hayden. They would recognize their faces,
yeah, absolutely.
and they would love it.
Yeah, and then another comment I wanted to talk about, the Midichlorian News Network at MCNN Pod said, "Why did you make me choose? Because mainly I wanted to make Jesse choose, and then I applied that to everybody.
Oh no,
It's so difficult." Midichlorian News Network said, "I think Obi-Wan for two reasons. So we can find out why he was involved with Rey's vision in The Force Awakens, which is a very good point.
True.
And so he can troll Kylo for the duration of the movie, and it gets blamed on Hux, which I thought was hysterical. Obi-Wan basically only showing up to bother Kylo Ren and then like point at General Hux like he did it. It wasn't me." I think that would be so funny.
Ray, reach out. Yeah, that'd be good. I would die if Ewan was in this, but I'm kind of dying to my wants of Ewan being Obi-Wan again, and I think Hayden just makes the most sense for the story, and I think that's what it needs to be.
And that was sort of the majority opinion on the poll as well.
Right. So we appreciate you guys voting in our polls. We're going to do one every week, like we've been doing, usually at the beginning of the week on a Monday or Tuesday. So please pay attention. We run them all week. So even if you missed it on Monday or Tuesday or something like that,
Well,
you
we
can vote
usually
in
run
it.
them all week. Sometimes I'm a dum-dum and I try to make a poll with my phone and I forget to set it for the whole week. But I think we're past that now.
Mike does like a 6-hour one or something, limited one. So this one had great participation from you guys. Thank you. We think this is a really interesting topic, especially now that we've seen Yoda come back. Obviously, it seems like Mark's coming back to play Force Ghost Luke. All these good things. I want to see more. I really do want to see more, Mike.
All right, so thanks for joining us here in the Canon Cantina today. We've just got a couple more things to talk about before we wrap up. Before we get to all the social media stuff, we've made a big push to get to 50 ratings on the Apple Podcasts app or iTunes Store, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to go ahead and chalk this one up to me putting Ben Quadraneros before the Quad Engine Pod Racer again, like I did way back when we first started with our Twitter account name. I just sort of picked 50 as an arbitrary name, but after the past several weeks of like looking at our podcast statistics, less than half of our listeners use Apple Podcasts. I do because I have an iPhone and that's just sort of the world I live in. So I apologize for forcing my Apple-centric view on.
I can't even give us her. I can't even.
So what we're going to do is, sorry, Android and other users. So instead of releasing our Force Awakens watch-along commentary at 50 ratings, we're going to do it at 25 because, like I said, 45% of our listeners use Apple Podcasts, so less than half use the Apple Podcast app. We're just going to cut that number in half. Sure, we also get to put something out earlier that way, but I do feel like this provides a more fair cross-section of our listeners too. So my bad. We're a lot closer to 25. So as soon as we get to 25 ratings on the Apple Podcast app, that's not written reviews. You just click a star rating and we will drop our Force Awakens watch-along commentary. So my apologies to the non-Apple majority of you out there.
There you go. The good news, Mike, is if you guys write us a review, like I mentioned in our first bonus episode, if you write a review, we will read it on the show and we will give you a shout out. So that's what I'm about to do right now, Mike. I'm going to read one of our first reviews we were ever given. For those of you guys that have written reviews, I'm going to be going through reviews and reading them. And those of you guys that write us reviews in the future, we're going to read them. If it's bad for us, if it's funny, if it's straightforward, it doesn't matter.
If you give us a 1-star rating, it better be funny.
It better be funny. So to help us reach that, we hope you guys write reviews as well, even if they're short. I would love that. Right now, Mike, we're sitting at 17 reviews, so we're getting real close to that 25. I love it. And you guys have been so kind to us. That's 17 reviews of 5 stars. But let's go ahead and read our first review that was written. This is by Jar Jar is my favorite. And the
off to a not so solid start.
I'm in love.
Okay.
And the title of the review is A Solid Start to the Podcast. I stumbled across this show hoping to find a podcast about photography for Mexican restaurants, but I was pleasantly surprised to find a show about one of my all-time favorite film franchises. Hosts Jesse and Mike do an excellent job providing detailed analysis of all aspects of the movies and books, including tidbits you never stop to think about. Whether you're a long life-on nerd of Star Wars or just a casual fan, you'll walk away with a new perspective on the character of Luke Skywalker. And as a side note, the co-host Mike strikes me as the kind of guy who has spiky hair.
I don't actually specifically know who this is, but this sounds like I used to be a high school teacher, and this sounds like one of my former students came across the podcast. So welcome.
That's awesome.
You're failing.
They're failing. No, they're winning. Jar Jar is my favorite.
Fine,
Mike
you have
has
an A
spiky
now.
hair, Mexican restaurants, and unique perspective on Luke and the literature. I like it. I love it.
When we get to 25 ratings, that's just clicking a star, not writing something like that. We'll drop our Force Awakens watch-along commentary. But if you want to have something read on the show, go ahead and write us a commentary on Apple Podcasts. Or if we start seeing them pop up on other podcast services, we'll read those too. Thanks for joining us here today in the Canon Cantina. You can connect with us on Facebook. We have a Facebook page. Just search for the Canon Cantina. Find us on Twitter at the Canon Cantina and on Instagram at Canon Cantina.
That is exactly it, Mike. And I have one last footnote to put on this Heir to the Jedi. Oh,
the footnotes.
Thorn in my side.
Yeah, this has been by far our most.
This is an odd episode.
Disjointed. Yeah. Usually we talk about Star Wars like we like it, but it was a slog today. But yeah, go ahead. What have you got?
Well, usually I can't stop talking. I have to stop myself. Usually I write my own essays about these books. You know what I mean, Mike? Usually Mike has to go in and delete half of what I write. This time Mike was like, "Do we have enough content to talk about?" And I was like, "Oh man, don't forget about the noodle scooting. It's coming." But I got to mention my close friend Wesley, who lives in Oklahoma City. First of all, is a listener of our show, which I strongly appreciate, and he's one of my closest friends. And I will say he's a devoted and massive Star Wars fan. But in the past, he never read the Legends or EU. He, of course, heard the stories. He knows some of the synopsises about Thrawn and things like that, like a lot of fans do. But he never got into it. And when he saw the opportunity with the new canon, he said, "Oh my gosh, the new canon's coming out. I'm a reader." He reads a ton. He's brilliant. And he said, "I'm going to buy these books." So he bought Heir to the Jedi, Tarkin, some of these other earlier canon books, excited to dig into the new canon and kind of start the EU fresh, Mike, which is really why Disney did it, right? So no people. And he sat down. His first read was Heir to the Jedi. And he texted me and called me at this time, and I, of course, have not read Heir to the Jedi till now. I've somehow put it off, and I've read several EU books several times, so that should put in perspective how long I've put this off. And he basically was like, "You've led me astray for so long. What, like, is this what Star Wars?"
This is the lies that the Jedi.
No, he didn't actually say that, but he was like, "Is this what the Legends and new canonical stuff is going to be like?" And I was like, "Man, I haven't read the book yet, but what you're telling me right now, no, that sounds nothing like the old Legends. I mean, even the worst parts of old Legends and something like that. And no, in no way does that sound like the new books." Because at that point, I'd read Tarkin, by James Luceno, and was impressed. And I just want to say, it gets better, man. It gets better. And I got to buy you a beer for that, because now after I've sat down and done an in-depth review of Heir to the Jedi, I feel bad. And the least you deserve the shout out, and the most you deserve, I don't know, something. So we'll revisit this later. This is a footnote I had to add, Mike. I feel
bad for him and every other fan beyond the movies who was like, "I'm going to go.
I'm going to start reading
this one.
Canon.
Has Luke on the
I'm
cover.
Start reading the canon. What a
Oh, Luke's on the cover. Heir of the Jedi. Oh my God, this is bad.
Yeah, and the last thing I want to mention about him is he even texted me after listening to the show and said, "I'm really enjoying the show, and the Legend stuff you guys are doing, it's great because I'm learning about it." He goes, "Are you guys going to cover Heir to the Jedi?" And I said, "It's coming." And he said, "Well, I'm sorry, it's bad." He's like, but you guys obviously have a show about Luke, so it seems important." I said, "Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I don't know what else to say. Here we go." So this is for Wesley, and that's about it. So cheers, man, to that. And may everyone noodle scoot towards Vader's prosthetic limbs with their future readings.
Oh, all right. No, you're I'm going to turn you down. You're not allowed.
Thanks for that. May the Force be with you guys.
Hold on. We're not done yet because the Canon Cantina is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play. We are on Stitcher. We're hosted on Podbean, Podcast Addict. We post our episodes on YouTube. And if you are a Spotify person, we are on Spotify now. Help spread the word of this show. Subscribe, rate, review. We've gained a bunch in the past couple of weeks. It's been great. Thank you so much. If you think we can do something better, please send us an email to canoncantina@gmail.com, or if you leave us a 1-star review, tell us what you think we can do better there. Join us next week as we go back to the canon run of the current Marvel comics and take a look at the crossover event Vader Down.
Yes, if you guys want to read along at home, pick up Vader Down. It's really fun.
Yeah, no, this is a much. How many times
Much.
did I say much? This is a much more fun and Star Wars-esque reading experience than the stuff we went over today. Thanks for enduring Heir to the Jedi with us here in the Canon Cantina, everybody. Cheers.
May the Force be with you. I want to be free of this pain.
Boring conversation anyway.